Hi there, welcome to Nonsense Whisky. My name's Vin PF, and on today's episode we're going back down from the lofty heights of something that was well over £500 last time to something that's a little bit cheaper now, and that's in the kind of £30 to £40 mark. That sort of region we're talking about. It has changed a little bit over the last couple of years from about 35 to nearly 40 now. So this is a Campbelltown whisky, and I don't cover many Campbelltown whiskies, not because I don't like them, but just because they're not that available where I am. I can get them on the internet, kind of, but I've got far less Campbelltowns in the stock up here than I do anything else. But it's about time I covered one, so we're going in for the entry level Glen Scotia double cask. Now, I said this is about £30–40, but it's presented at 46%, which is always a good thing. I like that percentage. It's very indicative of an idea of quality. You know, they're trying to convey that they're not just trying to money grab, but they're trying to present something that's worth drinking. Now, the Glen Scotia distillery itself is a Loch Lomond distillery now, as of 2014, and this is part of a new range that came out in 2015, which includes the 15-year age statement and the Victoriana, which I've got both of those, and I will be covering those at some point. I think I've even got the 18-year, the old 18-year as well, which came out in 2012. But anyway, let's get on with this whiskey and see what's going on with it, shall we? Now, it's called double cask. Now, that's really just a fancy way of saying it's finished in a different wood. So it's first maturation is in first fill ex-bourbon casks. Just in case you don't know what I mean by first fill, we're talking about ex-bourbon, so it's had some bourbon in it over in America. They can't use it again by their laws, so they ship it over to us for a relatively little amount of money. And these casks tend to get used over and over and over again. Now, this first fill means that it hasn't had anything else in it apart from the bourbon, and now this. So sometimes you'll have refill, then you'll get first fill, refill, then third fill, fourth fill, and then on to the really kind of poor end of the blends where it gets so cheap because the wood has just been battered and used and it's got nothing left to give anymore. First fill, anyway, is a good thing, basically, if you see that. Then it's taken out of that after an unspecified amount of time, and it's finished for 12 months in PX, Pedro Jimenez Sherry casks to give it its final presentation. Let's go on the nose and see what we got. Now, here's an interesting thing on this one. I talk a lot on the channel about kind of caramels and things like that, but never have I smelled a smell that's almost exactly the same as caramel before. Usually you kind of like, you've got sweet sugars and you've got vanillas, and combined together you're getting a kind of a fudge note. This is just pure caramel. Silky smooth caramel. It's really moist. It's so sweet. So already I can tell you that if you're not into your kind of sweety whiskies, then this probably isn't going to be for you, but for me it's right up my street. I do like a sweet whiskey. Funnily enough, I'm struggling to pick out any kind of sherry notes from it on the nose. Not a huge fan of sherry, so I must admit I find it a struggle to pick those notes out unless it's kind of the entire maturation period is in those sherry casks, but for a 12-month finish, for me, I'm just stuck on all the sweetness there. Really nice, actually. Let's try a little bit. Now, for 46%, it doesn't have as much bite as I thought it would, but I think that's a good thing. You know, it's a nice, smooth, for want of a better word, whiskey. The palate has more of those sugars. It's very sweet dram. Not the sweetest, but it is very sweet. And on the palate is where I'm picking out those kind of sherry notes. So if you're into your sherried whiskies and you want that kind of the sherry bombs, let's say, again, I don't think this matches that. But it's very understated. Nice finish, let's say. On the finish, you're getting those kind of waft of sherry notes. Now, it really is an excellent dram. The trouble is going to be convincing people it's an excellent dram, because we've got a no age statement and it's sort of roughly £40, which is starting to get expensive, you know. With the no age statement kind of being quite prevalent these days, there's definitely room for them, and there's definitely room for good ones. This is why I like to cover no age statements for a start, because I can tell you which ones are good and which ones aren't, and hopefully I've done that today with this one. If you're into sweet whiskies, probably yes. If not, then probably no. But it really is quite tasty. and they've tried to present it in such a way to give you that value for money and that entry level into the Glen Scotia range. I would say in general, if you've liked my comments on it, then it's definitely one that you should try and check it out. Maybe try and get a sample if you can, but really it's cheap enough that you can take a punt on it. If you're watching these videos, then you must be some kind of interest in whiskey. Then I think it's worth trying, especially if you're looking to try to get into those Glen Scotias themselves. It's a toss-up, it's a toss-up. For me, it's a brilliant dram. For you, hopefully it is, but if it isn't, it doesn't really matter too much. You can move on to the 15, move on to the higher level ones and see what's there instead. You know what I'm talking about. So this, we've got a trouble with Glen Scotia. Get rid of all of that.